Hi everyone, I'm Mark Duiker, Senior Developer Advocate at Ably, where we enable developers to build live and collaborative experiences. In this video, I'd like to show you how to build a real-time dashboard that shows the progress of a serverless workflow. The workflow is implemented using Azure functions and durable functions, and it uses Ably serverless WebSockets to publish messages to the front end, which is built using Vue.js and it's running in Azure Static Web Apps. I've written about this in this blog post, so if you want all the information in detail, I recommend you to read this. I'll include the link in the description. For now, let's just have a look at the demo and then I'll highlight some code. So this is the demo application built around a pizza ordering system where you have already done the configuration of your pizza. So let's see what happens when we click the place order button. So this workflow consists of 6 individual steps of order received, sending instructions to the kitchen, and now our pizza will be prepared, and so on. And once each of these activities, of these steps are finished, the progress will be published from the backend, from durable functions to Ably, and is received then in this front end. So the workflow itself is not running in the browser, the workflow is running in Azure Functions in Azure. So this is just a visualization. And now at this moment, the workflow is completed and we can do the same thing again. By the way, this is all available in open source. There are links to the GitHub repos here, as well as the link to the blog post. So let's have a look at the code now. Let's switch to VS Code. So I'm using CodeTour to give you a guided tour through the code. I'll just highlight some steps and not all of the 22 steps. So if you want to go through it on your own pace, then I recommend you to clone this repository, open a folder, and then you'll be asked to install the CodeTour extension and some other extensions. So I definitely recommend you doing so because then you can do the same thing, but you can dive into all of the details. So this is just to highlight all of the components that are used. So clients are visiting a website that's hosted on Azure Static Web Apps. We also use 2 HTTP functions there hosted by Static Web Apps. We're using another function app that contains our serverless workflow. And we'll be using Ably to forward the events or the messages that are published from this workflow to our front end using WebSockets. If we go one level more detailed, then we can see here that the function app that's part of Azure Static Web Apps contains 2 HTTP functions. There's a create token request function that gets an Ably token, so we can connect to Ably and we can subscribe to all of the updates. And the other one, the place order function, is an HTTP function that forwards the order to the other function app. And the other function app will then start a new instance of the PizzaWorkflowOrchestrator. And that will do a function chain of these 6 activity functions. And as soon as each of these 6 functions is completed, so at the very last line of these functions, we'll do a publish of a message to Ably, and that will be forwarded to the front end. So let's first have a look at the orchestrator function. So that's this. So with durable functions, you can create your orchestrations in code. So for instance, you can see here that we do a call activity async to the receive order activity function, and we can specify some input and we get back a result, and we can use that result as an input for another function that we're calling the send instructions to kitchen. Then based on a certain menu type, we call another activity function, prepare pizza, and there can be multiple types of them. So that's why we are waiting here when all of the prepared pizza activity functions are completed, then we are continuing. And then there's the CollectOrder activity function, the deliver order activity function, and the final delivered order. So when this is completed, then you have received your pizza. So if we look at one of these activity functions, for instance, the CollectOrder activity function, it's very small. It doesn't do anything meaningful right now because it's a demo. We're just logging some information. We're doing a thread sleep to just simulate some processing time, so the workflow is different each time, duration-wise. And finally, we're using the base class to do a publish async. We specify an order ID and the name of the event that we're publishing, and some event data, which is a workflow state. So if we look at the base class, because that's where the magic happens regarding Ably, this is the MessagingBase class that is used. So that's using an Ably interface, and we use dependency injection in the startup class to make sure we get a valid REST client, which can do the publishing of the messages for us. So in the publish async method, we retrieve the channel name, which is a combination of the order ID and a channel prefix that we get from our environment variables. We then get the actual Ably channel based on the channel name, and we do the publish async where we specify an event name and the data that goes with it. So this is all done at the backend. So each activity function inherits from this abstract MessagingBase class, and will do a publish async with their specific event and some specific data. Well, how is this used in the front end? Well, I've configured a type, a PizzaWorkflow type that consists of the 6 individual workflow states. So all these states correspond to an activity function in Drupal functions. And there were some additional flags and some additional strings for some IDs that we need to indicate how far the visualization is progressing. The front end is subscribing to all of these specific events. That's happening here. So here you can see we are subscribing to all of these individual events. So receiving the orders and instructions to kitchen, preparing pizza. So we're subscribing to these named events, and then we have specific handler functions for each of these events. And for instance, this is the handle order received event. And what happens there we are doing a patch and an update to our local state. This is the order received state. We are setting the order ID, and we are setting some timestamps that we get back from the backend and from Ably, and the timestamp from the front end, so we can actually have a bit of an indication how long it took from sending the message to receiving the message. And we set some flags which are used in the front end to indicate if it's enabled or disabled. Then two useful Vue components. So first there's the PizzaProcess Vue component, and that contains all of these 6 steps. So if we look at the template here, that template contains 6 progress items. So these are other components for each of the individual workflow states of the function. And then finally, this progress item step uses the individual workflow state. We have some helper functions here, and here is the template, and based on the flags that are set on the state, we change some visualizations of the images, for instance, so how it's styled, if it's black or white or in color, and we set also the text underneath the image with some state information there, the title and the timestamp, for instance, and the order ID. So now that you've seen how to create a real-time dashboard using Drupal functions and Ably, I highly recommend you to have a look at the GitHub repo and try this yourself. Please clone or fork the repo, maybe try to extend it with another workflow step to see what you then need to change in the backend and the front end. And although this is running in Azure, you can use exactly the same approach if you're running your workflow somewhere else, right? Because you basically publish your messages in the backend using Ably, and then you can subscribe to these messages in the front end using the Ably SDK there as well. Finally, if you have any questions or comments about this solution, please feel free to join our Discord. We can have a chat over there. I'll put the link in the description. And until next time, bye.